In case you haven't been watching the channel and you're unfamiliar with what's going on in this Jason Levesque trial, we're going to give you a quick overview. Basically, Jason Levesque, he's in his snowplow truck with his daughter. It's snowing outside. He comes home. He wants to shovel some snow, right? He starts doing his thing. He's shoveling the snow. And then his neighbor, Kyle Violet, he notices that Jason's shoveling the snow a little bit too closely to his driveway. So Kyle, he gets upset. He goes out. He puts on the hoodie. He goes across the yard into Jason's yard. He gets in Jason's face, nose to nose. He's upset, clearly, as testified by Jason's daughter. And Kyle says, if you push snow into my yard, I'm gonna. And Kyle's like, he's confused. He doesn't know what's going on. He just worked 24 plus hours. He's just pulling up in his driveway. And allegedly, according to Jason, Kyle starts to walk off. And then Kyle's like, oh, you don't believe me? Hold on a second. And at this point, Jason goes into his truck. He gets out a gun and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shots into Kyle Violet. Kyle's laying there on the ground. Paramedics come, police come. Kyle and his daughter give a statement. Police get statements from everyone surrounding. That happened last April. Jason has been sitting in jail since that time. Now, we've been here on trial. We've got to hear testimony from both sides, and we are getting now to closing arguments. And we're going to get more of a better summary of what happened during this case, what happened in this instance, and what the defense says that Jason did in self-defense and what the prosecution thinks he did in attempted murder. So with that overview, we'll go ahead and get right into closing arguments. Now, the interesting thing was the defense actually started closing arguments today, and then Jason's dad, who was in the courtroom, had a medical emergency, which was wild. So the judge had to shut everything down. They stopped. They took a little bit of a break. Thankfully, we're on a little bit of a delay, so we won't have to go through that. But just to give you guys a little bit of background, what happened there. Here we go.
As my staff informed you, the gentleman who had the medical incident during the proceedings is doing well and has been seen.
And his dad's okay.
And so at this point, we're going to reconvene. Obviously, what happened in the courtroom has, as you can imagine, has no bearing on your decision in this case, one way or the other. So I ask that you not give any further thought or consideration in terms of your role as jurors in this case. And so we're going to continue with Attorney Sitzke's closing argument. Attorney Sitzke, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. And thanks for hanging in there. I was telling these guys, you got to see me do what I used to do a long time ago. Okay? He's okay. All right.
So his dad's okay.
Okay, let's start this again. I want to get back to the very, very basic principles of why we're all here. And basically, why we're all here is to give Jason a fair trial and to follow the principles of law as they were outlined to you by the judge. And we'll go right back to the beginning. It was proof beyond a reasonable doubt, burden of proof, presumption of innocence, and then, folks, the additional thing in this case was self-defense. And you all got a grasp of what that was. And you got to see some of it during the course of the trial, and now I'm going to try to explain where we are with this thing.
Oh, Dottie.
Like I said, this is an interesting case. It's a self-defense case. There's no question about it. And there's some very graphic material in here, very graphic medical material. You saw that video, and you heard about what was taking place. They're heroic medical procedures, I can assure you, that kept Kyle alive. And he was very lucky to have a combat-trained individual on scene at that point in time. That's all I can tell you. And he's alive. So the gory film that you saw, frankly, is not at issue. The injuries were very significant. There's no question. Gunshot wounds themselves are very significant. These were very significant. But this is a rare incident, folks, where you get to see somebody, in this case, Kyle Violet himself, the centerpiece of the prosecution's case, in a situation where not only was he threatening on April 5th, something that he had done before with Jason, and I'll go back to that, the October incident, for no reason at all, the threat to his life, the threat to his family's life, right in front of his own home, for no reason at all. And we almost have an instant replay of that. But this time it's even more bizarre, because this time the claim is that he's plowing snow into his driveway or something to that effect. The beautiful thing in this case is that you have some film that you can actually look at. And if you look at it, Jason is actually being extremely careful in the plowing, not to interfere 1 inch into Violet's driveway. And he's minding his own business. Jason had gotten up on April 3rd at about 8 o'clock. By the time you see him plowing, all right, he's already into about his 38th hour of being awake, of working, not just being awake, but working. Now let me suggest something. When you go back into the jury deliberation room, you may want to do this. You may want to take a poll of everybody back there and ask who back there has been up for 38 to 41 hours in a row ever in their life. Ever. Ever. And you may want to say, if somebody does raise their hand, how did it feel? Did you feel with it? Were you working during that particular period of time? Were you in a combat situation? Just what was it? Were you in the comfort of your dorm room or your home? You know, get the context. But I assure you, if there is somebody that was up that long, they will tell you that they were worth pretty much nothing mentally, pretty much nothing physically at that point in time. You can all relate to that. I mean, there's nights where you just want to go to bed, even though you've been up for only 15 hours. This is more than twice that length of time.
It's true.
So when Jason
That's rough.
is confronted by Kyle Violet on the evening of April 4th, 2024, we know for sure from the video that Violet initiated the contact, and he literally, physically assaulted Jason. He placed his face intentionally on Jason's face. Now, why would somebody do that?
Why would somebody
Again,
do that?
what would a reasonable
question.
person believe if somebody did that to them out of nowhere? Well, Violet did it to threaten them. The physical act alone was a threat. I mean, imagine that. Imagine somebody coming up to you out of nowhere and sticking their face right onto your face. But it's not just sticking his face on your face. It's threatening them at the same time. And it's threatening him at night while he's minding his own business at his home with his daughter in his truck. That's the context. That's the very context of when this starts. That's the alpha. That's the beginning.
Yep.
Kyle Violet really is the alpha and the omega of this case. He started this. You know, you wouldn't be sitting here at all. Think about this. You wouldn't be sitting here at all but for Kyle Violet.
It's true.
Why did everything go down like that? What was that scramble all about? It was all about Kyle Violet. He placed himself in a position intentionally to threaten Jason. To threaten Jason with death. There was nothing conditional about sticking his face on Jason's face. And there was nothing conditional about threatening him. And you'll see that it happens more than once. When you run that video, you take a look at how many contacts he had with him. I mean, what was he trying to prove? What in the name of God was going through his head? Other than to try to scare hell out of Jason Levesque. And to relive that same threat that he'd had with him months before. And again, it was for no reason whatsoever. None.
Yep.
Zero. So we know that he initiated the contact. We know that he stuck his face into Jason's face. We know that he made threats.
Mm-hmm.
He made multiple approaches. Now, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go through self-defense instruction in a second, but I'm going to ask you, do not abandon your common sense when you sit here. When you looked at that, what did you see? Did you see some cool, calm guy coming out to say, please move some snow, please don't block my driveway? Or did you see
I wish we could see it, man.
Insane guy coming up on somebody minding his own business in the middle of the night? And that's the context that you have to take this case. You're going to hear from the judge that you have to basically run it through the lens of what was going on that night. Not today, when we're all sitting in a courtroom, cool and calm, rolling it over in our heads, and going frame by frame, like Detective Dan did. Does that
Yeah,
sound
me
real?
too.
The reality is that this whole interaction took about 11 seconds. This is quick stuff. Quick decision material. With a man that was shocked that he was even going to run into Kyle Violet that night. There was no reason for it. Reason means something in this case. If you think for a second that Kyle was not threatened, that Jason was not threatened, then you gotta think twice. Anybody would have been threatened in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody would have been concerned about protecting themselves. Anybody would have been concerned about protecting themselves when somebody's saying that they're going to kill them, or kill their family, or both. That's the context that we're dealing with. That's the case. That's the case of the nation. Frankly, it's more than that because Kyle, he wouldn't give up. If you look at the video, he walks away, and you'll see his arms all over the place. You know what's going on there. And you see Jason standing still, doing nothing. You've got one madman screaming at Jason Levesque, doing nothing. And then he starts back at him.
Yep.
And that happens a couple times. And the last time he comes back at him, he's screaming at him and he's telling him, "You don't know me, you don't believe it? The threats keep coming. Threats keep coming."
He said,
I'm
watch
gonna ask you
this.
something. How many times do you have to put up with that?
0.
Do you have to wait until somebody comes at you with something? You know,
Right.
Jason Levesque didn't have the wonderful experience of what the deputies do in this courthouse when you enter through the front door. And that is check people out, see if they have any concealed weapons or metal or anything. He had no idea what he had. None. And you'll hear in the instruction that he doesn't have to even be threatened with a weapon. All this questioning about, did you see a weapon? Does he have a weapon? When you got there, did he have a weapon? Guess what?
It's not
That's
his
a
job.
mirage.
Yep.
That's a mirage. All Jason has to believe at the time is that somebody is out to kill him or cause serious bodily injury at that time.
Yep.
Not 5 hours later, not 2 hours later, not 2 minutes later, certainly not a year later. But at that time.
Imminent.
What
is
would
the
a
word.
reasonable person believe at that time? After somebody who had threatened you months before for no reason, and then came out of a house and threatened you again for no reason, and threatened death to you, was coming at you. What would a reasonable person think? Think something good was going to happen? Think they were going to talk it out?
What do y'all
He was
think?
violent, he was threatening, and he was out of control. That's what Kyle. That's what you were dealing with. That's what Jason was dealing with. And you know, you can put as much lipstick on a pig and earrings and bracelets and everything else that you want. But at the end, it's still a pig. Kyle Violet is no innocent human being. He bears the brunt of starting this thing, creating the situation,
Yep.
and the reaction from Jason. He bears the brunt of that. Nothing would have happened but for his behavior. Nothing.
Agreed.
Now, in this case, you got to see a breakdown. And you heard testimony from Detective Danny. And remember, he got to go frame by frame. Remember what he was doing? It was kind of cool, but I mean, it was frame by frame. And something that, of course, Jason wasn't able to do. I mean, retrospective observations are interesting, all right? But that's not the test. But I'll tell you something very important when you do frame by frame and you listen moment by moment of what you can hear. It may be very, very telling as to what was going to happen. In fact, Angela LeChant was almost a prophet of what was going to happen that night. And she took the stand and she raised her right hand. She swore to tell the truth. And she made something up. Right here in front of you. Not after a traumatic event. Not after over 40 hours of being up. Not after 24 hours of work. She made something up to skew the case, to hoodwink you guys. Angela LeChant, Kyle Violet's significant other, made something up. I'm sitting there wondering, is the prosecution going to hug what she said and urge you to believe her during their closing argument? I think not.
Nope.
Because what she said,
She
in
lied.
coordination with the video, is basically the prediction of the future that took place just seconds later. What she said is impactful. It's her present sense impression of what's going on with Kyle Violet. That's her watching her significant other going down the driveway and confronting Jason.
Yep.
And Detective Danny captured him. In fact, at 10/11/22 on the 4th of April, 2024, Angela LeChant is heard saying, quote, "Yep, there he goes. I don't know. He's
I hope he
all the
doesn't do
way out
anything
there.
stupid.
He better not do anything stupid." Who do you think she's talking about at that point?
Yep.
It can only be one person. It can only be one person. And that's Kyle Violet.
Yep.
She's watching her significant other, and you'll see the video, coordinating with her speech, going across the driveway, approaching Jason. And just a few seconds later, Angela says, "You better not do anything fucking dumb." Who do you think she's talking about? Jason's just standing by the truck, where she says. Who is in Jason's face? Kyle Violet. Now that's black and white. That's obvious. That's obvious. But she still had the gall to tell you, "No, I was actually talking about Jason." And that's absurd. That's ridiculous. And frankly, if you want to know the definition of a lie, that's a lie. That's a lie.
She was not talking about
That's
Jason
an
there.
attempt to deceive. That's an attempt to put her thumb on the scale, try to convince you guys of something that just wasn't happening.
And it doesn't make
That's
sense
something
either.
that's out there in outer space. That's Angela. That's Angela LeChant. What really happened that night, she could almost tell was going to happen. Somebody was going to do something stupid. And you saw it. Now, the self-defense case, there are many, many items you have to go over. And this instruction is going to help you out. Okay. And the judge is going to tell you that evidence has been presented that the defendant has acted in self-defense. When there's some evidence of self-defense, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did not act in self-defense. I mean, that's a heavy, heavy burden, okay? They have to disprove self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. If you have a reasonable doubt as to whether the defendant acted in self-defense, you must find the defendant not guilty. If you believe, in other words, that his reaction and his actions that night were centered around self-defense, then it's not guilty. It's clear. In deciding, this is critical now, you're going to hear it again, and you're going to have this instruction. In deciding whether the defendant acted in self-defense, you should consider all the circumstances surrounding the incident. All the circumstances surrounding the incident, which include the prior threat, all the work he did that day, his exhaustion, the fact that he was put upon by surprise, and that he was threatened. You should consider how the defendant acted under the circumstances as they were presented to him at the time, and not necessarily as they appear upon detached reflection. So you have to step back. You have to see how he would have been seeing things at that time. Okay? Not under a microscope, not after, clear, detached reflection, none of that. But at the time. These things happen quickly. And that's why this particular instruction is important. You should consider whether the defendant's belief that it was necessary to use deadly force was reasonable when he acted in the heat of passion. Not coolly and calmly. Right? Not rolling it over in his mind, but reacting to what was presented to him at the time. It gets better. A person has the right to use deadly force on another person to defend himself or a third person if three conditions are met. He actually believed that the other person was about to use deadly force against him or a third person. Doesn't say that he thought the other guy had a weapon. Doesn't say anything. All this weapon stuff is an illusion. He doesn't have to frisk him and see if he's got a weapon or not. In other words, the defendant can use deadly force if he actually believed that he or a third person was in imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury from another person. Serious bodily injury, ladies and gentlemen, can be as much as a sucker punch from a madman that breaks your nose or knocks you to the ground or whatever, okay? And folks, if you were looking at that film objectively,
Yeah, I wish we could see it, man.
Could have just
Damn.
happened any minute. Any second. Forget about minutes. There's a definition of serious bodily injury. For purposes of understanding self-defense, it means any harm to the body which causes severe, permanent, protracted loss or impairment to health or function or any part of the body. Not a bump or a bruise or a scratch. I'm not talking about that, okay? That wouldn't constitute serious bodily injury. And as the words imply, serious bodily injury requires a serious or significant injury. Could he anticipate a serious bodily injury? Yeah, when somebody's threatening death, you can kind of get to that spot. Even if the defendant actually believes that such danger existed, that is, that either he or some other person faced an imminent risk of either death or serious bodily injury, that belief must have been reasonable. I'm going to stop right there. You saw everything. You heard everything. You understand what's going on here. I don't want to be preaching to the choir too long. How could he not have a reasonable belief that this maniac meant what he said? When he came back
That's
at
fair.
me last time, he said, "You don't believe me?" In other words, there must be reasonable grounds for the defendant to believe that the other person was about to use unlawful deadly force against him or a third person. And here's the key. Self-defense does not require an actual danger to the defendant.
Requires
Rather,
a threat.
the defendant must reasonably believe that the other person was about to use unlawful deadly force. Again, check that box. He must reasonably believe that the amount of force he used was necessary for self-defense. You know, he said on and on and on and on, that he was trying to protect himself, that he was trying to protect his family.
What do y'all think so
I'm
far?
going to get into his testimony in a second. But to the police even that night, in the condition that he was in that night, that's what he was saying. A person's not permitted to use excessive force in self-defense, only a reasonable amount of force. And again, this has to be interpreted from at the time that he was perceiving these events. The defendant can use the amount of force which he believed was necessary under the circumstances, as long as, at the time, there was reasonable grounds for his belief. Folks, reasonable. One can very easily come to that conclusion, that his reaction was reasonable because he was put upon by an unreasonable human being. That he was put upon in a savage situation with threats of death in the situation that he was in. Let me tell you something, okay? Jason went through quite a bit that night. Not only was he exhausted, not only was he threatened by this maniac, but he was trying to care for his daughter as well. He was worried about his parents. Of course, he was worried about himself. And he was exhausted. So what happens after this thing happens? Is it somebody saying, oh my God, I'm going to run? No. Actions speak a lot louder than words. Jason Levesque stayed right there. He didn't make one move to leave. There may have been an off-cuff comment to his daughter that, quite frankly, is stupid and doesn't really amount to anything. He never tried to evade the police at all. In fact, there's evidence that he even dialed up 911 and just didn't hit the button because he heard the sirens call. It came from him, it came from his daughter. And it also speaks to the fact that he stayed there. It also speaks to the fact that he made the firearm safe. He prepared for his arrest. He placed the firearm in the dash. He took the extra magazine out of his pocket. He secured that. And when the police came, he stepped out of the vehicle, he raised his hands, and he cooperated all night long with the police. That's not somebody that's fleeing. That's not somebody with a guilty conscience. That's somebody waiting and anticipating and then cooperating with the police, just like an innocent person would do. No resistance, no lip, no nothing. When they asked him to get in the cruiser, he got in the cruiser. When they asked him if he could go to the police station with no problems, he went. When we got to the police station, folks, you saw the video. I want you to watch that video. It's about 20, 25 minutes long. Okay? And in the video clip, you're going to see a human being, all right, that is wiped out. I can't even describe it. This guy can hardly take his own sweatshirt off. He's cold. He's hot. He's nauseous. He's laying down on the floor of the interrogation room. That's just the beginning. There's almost 3 more hours of that. Do you think he got better over time? Do you think that's a good environment to get factual, actual, accurate information from somebody? Be surprised if he could tie his own shoes at that point in time. But they took a statement from him, a lengthy statement, and he was sitting there as long as they wanted to take it. This isn't somebody giving him lip. This isn't somebody that's resisting. This isn't somebody that's uncooperative. This is somebody like just what he said on the stand. He was just trying to help put it all together.
He shouldn't have never talked to the police, in my
opinion. You think somebody actually has a vivid, accurate memory? I should have drawn this a little bit. After being involved in a shooting, for the first time in his life, by the way. I mean, this guy doesn't even, like I said, he never even shot a chipmunk in his life.
Not a chipmunk,
you think that doesn't shake you up? You think that doesn't scramble you? You think if you add that to the threats, that doesn't scramble you? You think if you add that to the fact you've been up for 40 hours, that doesn't scramble you? You think if you add that to the fact that all you're getting is a glass of water and a Slim Jim, that doesn't scramble you? That's the context of the 3 hours, over 3 hours, of interrogation. But did he complain? Did he say, no, I don't want to do it? No. In fact, the entire night, this guy is cooperating with the police. Can we search your truck? Yes. Can we take your video info? Can we take your cameras? Can we take your hard drive? Yes. Can we have the password? Yes. Okay? Yes, yes, yes. Will you speak with us? Yes. Can we swab your hands? Yes. Everything's yes. He's trying, okay? Was he perfect in the interrogation? No. And you know what? Nobody would be. Not under those circumstances. Nobody would be. The honest answers are that he's doing everything he can, not only to help the police, but he's doing everything he can to try to explain what went on that night. He tried to do it with you guys. And you know it. He didn't have to take the stand. You know that, right? He didn't have to subject himself to cross-examination, and Attorney Bart's very good at it. Been doing it for years. He's very good at it. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to put up with that. Nobody forced him to go up there. Jason Levesque went up there because he wanted to look at you folks in the eye and tell you the best he could as to what happened. Not skewing the facts, not lying, not deceiving you, not playing games, not changing stories. Is it unreasonable, for instance, for somebody in that situation to not remember each and every time he pulled the trigger? It's an automatic. It goes on automatic. He's pulling. It's not done till it's over as far as he's concerned. And what's his concern at the time? Protecting himself, protecting his daughter, protecting his home. This thing happened right on the front steps of his home. Right in front, pretty much, where his mom and dad were sleeping. Right there. No lies and deception. That's a red herring. I'm going to urge you to take your time when you're deliberating. I'm going to urge you to listen to everything that's going on in those tapes that you have. Watch everything that's going on in those tapes that you have. Okay? You know, Detective Garston spoke of tactics and training and all this stuff for interrogation. Maybe he was running an interrogation with tactics and training and everything else. Jason Levesque, he's not sitting there constructing a self-defense defense. He's not constructing anything. He's trying the best he can to cooperate with the police after a traumatic incident. A first for him.
That was his first mistake.
Anything that was living and breathing. And you'll hear Garston. You'll hear him in that tape. Listen closely. When his body cam is not switched off, and he's talking to another officer. And he says, let's talk to this guy now. Let's talk to him now while he wants to talk. Okay. They got him in their place. They got him while he's exhausted. They got him while he's easy pickings. And you know what? They know deep in their heart they got a very frail human being that probably isn't going to be the best person in the world to get accurate information. They could have circled around 5 more times and probably gotten 5 more answers. Because even yesterday, Jason's not sure exactly what happened that night. You know why? Because the body tries to stop remembering things like that. It protects itself. It goes into shock. It tries to get rid of memories like that. And those are difficult to bring back accurately all the time. There's nothing unusual about that. Any trauma situation, there's nothing unusual. It's typical, it's human, it's natural. Some of you may have experienced this. Prosecution, in this case, for lack of a better analogy, was dealt a lousy hand. In order to get a conviction in the United States of America, in a courtroom like this on a criminal case, you got to hold aces. You got to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay? No goofing around. No halfways. No maybes. No probablys. No could-haves. None of that stuff works. The only way they get a conviction in this case is to prove beyond a reasonable doubt each and every element of the offense charge, each and every one, beyond a reasonable doubt. And they have to disprove self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. And in this case, ladies and gentlemen, they got dealt a lousy hand. They don't have 4 aces. If you flip their hand over, what they really have is a bunch of jokers. And the joker in the case is Kyle Violette. They got dealt Kyle Violette. And when you get dealt something like that, that's a gigantic reasonable doubt. And when you get dealt somebody that acted the way he acted in a self-defense case, that's a lousy hand. But don't feel sorry for him. This isn't about sympathy. It's not about worrying about their case. It's about critically analyzing their case and making them prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to make them prove it. If they don't, you understand?
Hey, I believe
you're doing your duty. You're doing your duty by coming through the doors of the deliberation room at the end of a trial and at the end of running through all the evidence, coming through and saying not guilty. That's the justice in the criminal justice system. It's not doing favors for the state. You don't do that. It's holding them to their burden. And I pray you do. I mean, there's a lot of junk that's going on outside of this courthouse. You all know it. I mean, our country's divided all over the place. All kinds of junk going on. Maybe the purest form of being a citizen right now, the purest form of being a citizen in this country, the purest form of democracy in this country, the purest form of doing your duty as a United States citizen in this country right now is in courtrooms just like this, with jurors just like you. Think about that. You're really the reflection of this community. You know that. Right? When you go back there, you're going to see you come from all different walks of life. You all have your own talents. You all have your own backgrounds. And you all have common sense. And if you all work together in this, if you all put your minds together, all 12 of you when you get back there, you're going to come up with a very just decision by using your common sense, looking at that evidence, being critical of the state's case, and following the rules. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you. I can't do anything anymore for Jason. I can't do a thing. And all I'm doing is putting all of my trust in you guys. And so is he. So really, take great care in your deliberations. Be sure to follow the rules. Take all the time you need. And thank you again. I appreciate it. Really.
All right, there it is.
Thanks.
So closing arguments from the defense. What do y'all think so far? I think he made some good points. Kyle cooperated. All right, Jason cooperated. He talked to the police, which I think was dumb. He should have never done in the first place. He said, yeah, you can have my videos. Yeah, I'll talk to you. Here's what I think happened. After he had been working for so long, he probably wasn't thinking clearly. Whatever. On the same side, it's interesting that Kyle's long-term girlfriend came up on the stand and clearly told a lie. I mean, come on. She was not talking about Jason doing something dumb. That doesn't make any sense. Her story doesn't make sense. What does make sense to me is that Jason and his daughter, they said they heard, and they both heard Kyle threaten Jason and his family. Now we want to talk about, we're going to hear later from the prosecutor how he thinks that threat should be seen when it comes to the entire situation. But let me know what y'all think about this in the comments and in the chat.